The door slammed so hard behind me, I swear the whole street felt it. "It's my house now, old woman." Daniel's voice ripped through the quiet Tuesday afternoon like a chainsaw through silk. "Get out and don't come back." I stood there on my own porch, well, what used to feel like my porch, with nothing but a small brown suitcase in my wrinkled hands. 72 years old, and here I was, being thrown out like yesterday's garbage. The neighbors were watching. Oh, I could feel their eyes burning through their curtains. Mrs. Patterson from across the street. The Johnsons next door. Even that nosy teenager who was always on his phone, he was recording this whole thing probably. Daniel stood in the doorway, his face red and twisted with something ugly. Rage, maybe. Or victory. His designer sneakers, the ones I'd seen him buy with money he said was from work, planted firmly on my welcome mat. The mat I'd picked out at Target 3 summers ago because it had sunflowers on it, and Thomas always loved sunflowers. Would you stand there and take it if your own stepson kicked you out of the house you built with your bare hands? Stay with me, because what I did next changed everything. I should have cried. I should have begged. I should have screamed back at him, told him he was an ungrateful snake who didn't deserve the roof over his head. That's what he expected. That's what would have felt normal. Instead, I smiled. Not a big smile. Not one of those crazy lady grins that would make people think I'd lost my mind. Just a small, quiet curve at the corner of my mouth. The kind of smile you give when you know something nobody else knows. When you're holding the winning lottery ticket and everyone around you is complaining about being broke. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. Daniel saw that smile, and something flickered across his face. Confusion, maybe. Or worry. But it was gone in a second, replaced by that same ugly sneer. "What are you smiling about?" he spat. "You got nothing left. Nothing. This house, this land, everything, it's all mine now. Dad left it to me, and you were just living here out of charity." "My charity. And I'm done being charitable." I adjusted my grip on the suitcase handle. The leather was worn smooth from years of family vacations, trips to the Grand Canyon, to Yellowstone, to that little bed and breakfast in Vermont where Thomas and I celebrated our 30th anniversary. All those memories packed into one piece of luggage, along with some clothes and the few photographs I'd managed to grab before Daniel started throwing my things out the window yesterday. "You hear me, old woman?" His voice cracked a little. He wanted a reaction. Needed it. I just kept smiling and turned away. My orthopedic shoes, the ugly ones with the Velcro straps that Daniel always made fun of, clicked against the concrete walkway. 1 step. 2 steps. 3. Each one taking me further from the house that Thomas and I had built from nothing. The house where we'd painted every wall ourselves. Where we'd installed that crooked ceiling fan in the bedroom that wobbled when it spun but we never fixed because it made us laugh. Where we'd planted rose bushes along the fence and argued about whether red or pink looked better. Behind me, I heard Daniel slam the door again. Then the deadbolt clicked. Then the chain lock rattled into place. Mrs. Patterson's front door cracked open. "Margaret." Her voice was soft, pitying. "Margaret, honey, are you okay? Do you need to call someone?" I waved at her without stopping. "I'm fine, Carol. Just fine." And I was. Because Daniel had made one crucial mistake. One tiny, stupid, arrogant mistake that was going to cost him everything. He never read the mortgage papers. My smile widened just a fraction as I reached the sidewalk. The afternoon sun was warm on my shoulders. Somewhere down the street, someone was mowing their lawn, and the smell of fresh-cut grass mixed with a honeysuckle blooming on the Petersons' fence. It was a beautiful day. A perfect day, really. A perfect day to watch someone destroy themselves. You see, Thomas and I had refinanced this house back in 2019. His health was getting bad, diabetes, high blood pressure, that family heart condition his daddy died from. We knew his time was limited. So we went down to First National Bank, sat across from a young loan officer named Jennifer who had coffee breath and kind eyes, and we restructured everything. Thomas insisted on it. Made sure every single document, every single piece of paper, every single legal form had my name on it. Margaret Eleanor Hotwell. Sole owner. Sole borrower. Sole everything. "I won't leave you vulnerable," he'd said, squeezing my hand in that bank office. "Danny's got his mother's mean streak. I love him, but I don't trust him. Not with you. Not with what we built. I'd argued. Said we should give Daniel a chance. Said family was family. Thomas just shook his head. You've got a good heart, Maggie. But sometimes a good heart makes you blind. Promise me you'll protect yourself. So I promised. And 6 months later, when Thomas passed away in his sleep with his hand still holding mine, I kept that promise. I kept my mouth shut when Daniel showed up at the funeral with his fake tears and his expensive suit. Kept quiet when he moved into the guest room temporarily, to help me through my grief. Stayed silent when he started making decisions about our house, about our finances, about our future. Let him think he was in control. Let him think he was the man of the house now. Let him think his daddy had left everything to him because he was the son, the heir, the one who deserved it. And now, let him learn exactly how wrong he was. I reached the corner of Maple Street and Oak Avenue, where the old stoplight always took forever to change. My suitcase felt heavier now. Or maybe I was just tired. 72-year-old bones don't bounce back like they used to. But I wasn't beaten. Not by a long shot. Because in 3 days, exactly 3 days, the mortgage payment was due. The payment that Daniel thought he didn't have to make because he thought the house was paid off. The payment that had my name on it, my bank account attached to it, my credit score riding on it. And I'd already called the bank this morning. Told them I wouldn't be making the payment. Told them to start foreclosure proceedings. Told them that whoever was living at 1247 Maple Street had no legal right to be there. Daniel thought he'd won. Thought he'd finally gotten rid of the old woman who was in his way. Thought he could sell this house, pocket the money, and live the high life he'd always dreamed about. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't even imagine, was that the only name on that deed was mine. The only person who could sell that house was me. The only person who had any legal claim to a single brick, a single nail, a single shingle was Margaret Eleanor Hartwell. And Margaret Eleanor Hartwell had just decided to burn it all down. Well, not literally. But close enough. The light changed. I crossed the street, heading toward Carol Patterson's house where I'd be staying until this all played out. She'd offered me her guest room yesterday when she saw Daniel throwing my clothes out the second-story window. Good woman, Carol. Salt of the earth. Behind me, back at 1247 Maple Street, Daniel was probably already on the phone. Probably calling his buddies, bragging about how he'd finally gotten the house. Probably planning what color he'd paint the living room, what kind of furniture he'd buy, how much money he'd make when he flipped it. Let him plan. Let him dream. Let him taste victory for just a few more days. Because when that foreclosure notice arrived, when the bank came knocking, when the sheriff showed up with eviction papers, Daniel was going to learn the hardest lesson of his life. You can't steal what was never yours to begin with. And the woman you called old and threw out like trash? She's the one holding all the cards. I reached Carol's front porch and knocked softly. Through the window, I could see her rushing to open the door, her face full of concern and questions. But I was still smiling. Because this wasn't the end of Margaret Hartwell's story. This was just the beginning of Daniel's nightmare. I never wanted that house to become a battleground. When Thomas and I bought that empty lot back in 1978, it was just dirt and dreams. 47 years ago now. God, has it really been that long? We were so young then. I was 25, Thomas was 28, and we had exactly $3,000 saved up between us. $3,000 and enough stubbornness to move mountains. We're going to build something that lasts, Thomas had said, standing in the middle of that empty lot with dirt on his work boots and hope in his eyes. Something our kids will inherit. Something that means family. Family. That word used to mean everything to us. Carol's guest room smelled like lavender and old books. She'd made up the bed with clean sheets, put a glass of water on the nightstand, and left me alone to rest. But I couldn't rest. My mind kept circling back to how we'd gotten here. How everything we'd built had turned into this ugly mess. Thomas had been married before me. That's where Daniel came from. His first wife, Patricia, had been a real piece of work, Thomas's words, not mine. She'd left when Daniel was only 3, ran off with some insurance salesman from Topeka, and Thomas raised that boy alone for 5 years before we met. I thought I could love Daniel like my own. God knows I tried. When Thomas and I got married in 1976, 7-year-old Daniel was our ring bearer. wore a little blue suit that was too big for him, dropped the rings halfway down the aisle and cried. I picked him up, wiped his tears, and promised him I'd never try to replace his mama. I'd just be Margaret, his dad's wife, his friend. Did you love him? People always ask me now. Did you love Daniel like he was yours? And the answer is yes. At least, I loved who I thought he was, who I hoped he could be. We raised him in a tiny apartment on the south side of town while we saved every penny for that lot. Thomas worked construction during the day, drove a taxi at night. I waitressed at the diner on Main Street, pulled double shifts on weekends. Daniel went to public school, wore hand-me-downs, ate a lot of spaghetti because it was cheap. But we were happy. Or at least, I thought we were. The house took us 3 years to build. Thomas did most of the work himself on weekends, and I'd be right there beside him, handing him tools, holding boards steady, learning how to lay tile and hang drywall. Daniel would play in the yard, building forts out of scrap wood, pretending to be a construction worker like his dad. Those should have been good memories. Golden memories. The kind you look back on and smile about. So when did it all go wrong? When did that sweet little boy turn into the man who screamed at me on my own porch? Maybe it started when Thomas's mother died and left Daniel $10,000. He was 17. We'd told him to save it for college. He bought a motorcycle instead and wrecked it 3 weeks later. Or maybe it was when he dropped out of community college after 1 semester because school was for suckers. Started hanging around with boys who wore expensive clothes and had no visible means of income. Or maybe it was the first time he asked Thomas for money, said he had a business opportunity, and Thomas said no. The way Daniel's face changed. The coldness that crept into his eyes. Thomas saw it before I did. He always did have better instincts about people. Danny's got his mother's blood, Thomas had said one night after Daniel stormed out over some argument I can't even remember now. Takes what he wants and doesn't care who he hurts getting it. I defended Daniel then. Said he was just going through a phase. Said all young men rebel against their fathers. Said he'd grow out of it. Thomas just looked at me with those sad, tired eyes and said, "I hope you're right, Maggie. I really do." But I wasn't right. And Thomas knew it. Daniel never finished college. Never held a job longer than 6 months. Never got married, never had kids, never built anything with his own 2 hands. He just drifted from one scheme to another, one girlfriend to another, one borrowed dollar to another. And every time he crashed, he came back to us. To the house that Thomas and I built. To the parents who'd bail him out one more time. He's family, I'd say to Thomas when he'd hesitate about letting Daniel move back in. We don't give up on family. Thomas would sigh and nod and open the door. But I could see it wearing on him. The disappointment. The worry about what would happen to me when he was gone. That's why he changed the mortgage papers. Why he made sure my name, and only my name, was on everything. "Promise me something," Thomas had said the night before he went into the hospital for the last time. His breathing was labored, his skin had that gray tint that meant his heart was giving out. "Promise me you won't let Danny take advantage of you." "He'll try. When I'm gone he'll try." I'd kissed his forehead and promised. But I don't think either of us knew just how right he was. Thomas died on a Monday morning in March. Went to sleep holding my hand and just never woke up. The doctor said it was peaceful. Quick. No pain. I wish I could say the same about what came after. Daniel showed up at the funeral wearing a suit that cost more than Thomas's entire wardrobe. Cried at the graveside. Hugged me and said, "I'm here for you, Margaret. You won't have to go through this alone." And fool that I was, I believed him. If you've ever lost someone you loved with your whole heart, hit like. Because what happened next almost destroyed what was left of mine. Daniel moved into the guest room 2 days after the funeral. Said he'd stay, just until you get back on your feet. That was 2 years ago. 2 years. At first, it was small things. He'd suggest what I should make for dinner. Comment on how I was spending money. Ask why I needed to see my friends so often. Then it got bigger. He started opening my mail. Said he was helping with paperwork. Started answering my phone. Said he was screening calls so you're not bothered. Started making decisions about house repairs, about bills, about my own bank account. "You're getting older, Margaret," he'd say with that concerned face that I now know was completely fake. You can't handle all this stress. Let me take care of things. And piece by piece, day by day, I let him. Because I was tired. Because I was grieving. Because some small stupid part of me still wanted to believe that this was Thomas's son taking care of his father's widow. My friends saw it though. Carol had pulled me aside at church one Sunday about 6 months ago. Margaret, honey, you need to be careful, she'd whispered. The way Daniel talks to you sometimes, it's not right. And I've seen him going through your purse when you're not looking. I'd brushed it off. Made excuses. Said she was imagining things. But she wasn't. And I knew it. Dorothy from my book club had said something too. That boy's got an agenda, Margaret. Mark my words. He's not staying in that house out of love. Even Father Michael at church had expressed concern. Have you thought about what your legal situation is? With the house? Your finances? It's important to protect yourself. But I didn't listen. Or maybe I didn't want to listen. Because admitting they were right meant admitting I'd failed. That I'd taken in this boy, loved him, raised him, and he'd turned into exactly what Thomas warned me about. The breaking point came last month. I'd been sorting through some boxes in the attic, Thomas's old things that I still couldn't bear to donate, and I found our original mortgage papers. The ones from before we refinanced. I sat up there in that dusty attic, reading through them, remembering the day we'd signed them. How nervous we'd been. How the banker had explained every detail. How Thomas had squeezed my hand and said, "This is ours, Maggie. All ours." And then I thought about the new papers. The ones from 2019. The ones that had only my name on them. Daniel had no idea. He'd never asked to see any documents. Never questioned anything. Just assumed that when Thomas died, everything automatically became his. That's when I made my decision. That's when I stopped being the nice, accommodating stepmother and became something else entirely. Something patient. Something quiet. Something dangerous. I went downstairs and made dinner like always. Set the table like always. Listened to Daniel complain about his day like always. And I smiled and nodded and said nothing. Because I was done fighting. Done arguing. Done trying to make him see reason. I was going to let him hang himself with his own rope. The next week, Daniel started getting aggressive. Saying the house was too much for me. That I should think about moving somewhere smaller. That he'd handle selling it, and make sure I got taken care of. I just nodded. Whatever you think is best, Daniel. He smiled then. Thought he'd won. 2 weeks later, he'd changed all the locks. Said it was for security. I had to knock on my own front door to get in. I said nothing. 3 weeks later, he'd moved all my personal photos into boxes in the garage. Said he was redecorating. Wanted to make the house more modern for when he sold it. I said nothing. 4 weeks later, he told me I needed to start looking for other living arrangements. That he'd given me enough time. That I was ungrateful for everything he'd done. I said nothing. And then yesterday, he'd snapped completely. Started throwing my clothes out the window. Packing my things into boxes. Yelling about how he was sick of taking care of me. How the house was his. How I was just a burden he'd put up with long enough. That's when I knew the time had come. I called the bank from Carol's cell phone while Daniel was sleeping. Spoke to Jennifer, who still worked there, who still remembered me and Thomas from that day in 2019. Mrs. Hartwell, she'd said, her voice full of concern. Is everything all right? No, I'd told her. But it will be. And I'd explained the whole situation. How Daniel thought he owned the house. How he'd kicked me out. How he had no idea his name wasn't on anything. Jennifer had been quiet for a long moment. Then she'd said, "What do you want to do?" "I want to stop making payments," I'd said. "I want you to start foreclosure proceedings on the property. And I want whoever's living there removed." "Are you sure?" Jennifer had asked. This is a big step. I thought about Thomas. About the house we'd built together. About the promises I'd made at his deathbed. "I'm sure," I said. Now, sitting in Carol's guest room, I wondered if Daniel had figured it out yet. If he'd found any of the mortgage statements I'd hidden in my suitcase. If he'd bothered to look at the property records that were public information. Probably not. He was too busy celebrating his victory. But in 3 days, that celebration was going to turn into something else entirely. And I was going to be there to watch it all burn down. Because sometimes the only way to teach someone about consequences is to let them feel every single one. The first call came at 6 in the morning. Carol and I were having coffee in her kitchen. She made it strong and black, just the way I liked it, when my cell phone buzzed on the table. Daniel's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. Took another sip of coffee. Watched the sun come up through Carol's lace curtains. You going to answer that? Carol asked, eyebrows raised. Nope. The phone stopped ringing. 30 seconds later, it started again. Daniel. Again. I declined the call and turned the phone face down. Margaret, Carol said carefully, what exactly are you planning here? I'd told her some of it. Not everything. Just enough that she understood I wasn't as helpless as Daniel thought. But I hadn't explained the full plan. Hadn't told her about the foreclosure. About what was coming. I'm planning to let a grown man learn what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you, I said. Carol studied me over her coffee mug. She'd known me for 15 years, ever since she and her husband moved in across the street. She'd been there when Thomas died. She'd seen how Daniel had slowly taken over my life. Good, she finally said. It's about damn time. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message. Margaret, where are you? Then another one. You need to come back, we need to talk. Then another. I am sorry, okay, I lost my temper, just come home. I showed the messages to Carol. She snorted. Now he's sorry, she said. Now that you're gone, and he's probably realized he actually has to handle things by himself. She had no idea how right she was. Over the next 2 days, Daniel called me 47 times. 47. I know because Carol counted. She thought it was hilarious. The messages got more desperate as time went on. Margaret, this isn't funny. You can't just leave. I need to talk to you about the house. There's some paperwork I can't find. That last one made me smile. He was finally starting to look. Finally starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, he'd made a mistake. But it was too late now. The wheels were already in motion. On the 3rd day, exactly 3 days after he'd kicked me out, I got a different kind of call. This one from Jennifer at the bank. Mrs. Hartwell, she said, I wanted to let you know that the foreclosure notice has been mailed. Daniel should receive it tomorrow. Thank you, Jennifer. Are you sure about this? There's still time to. I'm sure. There was a pause. Then Jennifer said, he's going to be very angry. Let him be angry, I said. Angry's better than what he's been. That night, Carol made spaghetti for dinner. The same kind of spaghetti I used to make for Daniel when he was little. Cheap sauce from a jar, ground beef, garlic bread from the frozen section. You remember when he was 7, I said, twirling pasta on my fork, and he told everyone at school that I made the best spaghetti in the world? Carol nodded. She'd heard all my stories about Daniel over the years. The good ones and the bad ones. I do remember, she said. You were so proud. I thought I was doing it right, I said quietly. Raising him. Loving him. I thought that's all it took. Love and spaghetti and being there. You did do it right, Carol said firmly. Daniel's choices are his own. You can't love someone into being a good person if they don't want to be. But part of me still wondered. Part of me still felt like maybe if I'd done something different, been stricter or softer or smarter, maybe he wouldn't have turned out this way. Then I remembered him screaming, "It's my house now, old woman," and that feeling went away real quick. The next morning, I was sitting on Carol's porch when I saw the mail truck pull up to 1247 Maple Street. Watched the mailman walk up to the door. Watched him slide a large envelope into the mailbox. The foreclosure notice. I waited. Sipped my tea. Watched. 20 minutes later, Daniel came out to get the mail. He was wearing the same clothes he'd had on yesterday, wrinkled t-shirt, basketball shorts. His hair was a mess. He looked tired. Good. He grabbed the mail and started flipping through it as he walked back toward the house. Bills, probably. Junk mail. And then, he stopped. Right there in the middle of the driveway. staring at the large envelope. I could see his face change even from across the street. Confusion. Then concern. Then he was ripping the envelope open, pulling out the papers inside. His mouth moved. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could imagine. He read for a long time. Flipped through pages. Read some more. Then he looked up, looked around like he was trying to find someone to blame. His eyes landed on Carol's house. On me sitting on the porch. Our eyes met across the street. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Daniel started walking. Fast. Across his lawn, across the street, straight toward me. Carol must have been watching from inside because she came bursting out the front door. "You stay right there, Daniel Hartwell," she shouted. "You don't take another step." But he kept coming. His face was red. His hands were shaking. He waved the papers at me like they were on fire. "What is this?" he shouted. "What is this?" I set my tea down slowly. Carefully. Took my time. "Looks like a foreclosure notice," I said calmly. "Foreclosure? Foreclosure? How can they foreclose on my house?" There it was. The moment I'd been waiting for. "It's not your house, Daniel," I said. Each word clear and sharp. "It was never your house." His face went from red to purple. "What are you talking about? Dad left it to me." "Your father left you nothing," I interrupted. "Because your father made sure everything went to me. The house. The mortgage. The property. All of it. My name. Not yours." You could have heard a pin drop. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Daniel's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "You're lying. You're a liar. Dad wouldn't." "Your dad knew exactly what kind of man you were," I said. "That's why he protected me from you. That's why he made sure you couldn't take what we built." "No." Daniel shook his head. "No, you're just mad because I kicked you out. You're making this up. You forged something. You." "Call the bank," I said. "Go ahead. Call them right now. Ask them whose name is on the mortgage. Ask them who owns 1247 Maple Street. I'll wait." He stared at me. His hands were shaking so hard the papers rattled. "You did this on purpose," he said. His voice was different now. Quieter. More dangerous. "You let me kick you out. You wanted this to happen." I smiled. The same smile I'd given him 3 days ago on that porch. "I didn't let you do anything, Daniel. You did it all by yourself. You kicked me out of my own house. You changed my locks. You threw away my things. And you never once bothered to check if you actually had the right to do any of it. You manipulative." "Careful," Carol said, stepping forward. "You're on my property now. And if you call Margaret any names, I'm calling the police." Daniel looked between us. His jaw working. His eyes wild. "This isn't over," he finally said. "I'll fight this. I'll get a lawyer. You'll lose," I said simply. "Because the law is on my side. The bank is on my side. And the truth is on my side. You have no claim to that house. You never did. And in 30 days, when that foreclosure goes through, the sheriff is going to come and remove you from MY property." The word "my" hit him like a slap. I could see it in his face. "You planned this," he said again. "You planned all of this." "No," I said. "You did. Every choice you made. Every mean word. Every time you treated me like I was nothing. You planned this, Daniel. I just stopped getting in your way." He stood there for another moment, breathing hard, crushing the foreclosure papers in his fists. Then he turned and walked back across the street. But he didn't go inside. He just stood in the driveway, staring at the house. His house. Except it wasn't. And now he knew it. Carol let out a long breath. "Well," she said. "That went better than I expected." "It's not over yet," I said. And I was right. Because 30 minutes later, a truck pulled up to 1247 Maple Street. 2 men got out and started loading furniture into the back. Daniel was already trying to sell what he could. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that everything in that house was technically mine too. Every stick of furniture. Every appliance. Every single item that he thought was his to sell. I pulled out my phone and called the police. "Hi, yes," I said when the dispatcher answered. "I need to report a theft in progress. Someone is removing property from my home without permission." Carol's eyes went wide. "Margaret." I held up a hand. Gave the dispatcher the address. Confirmed I was the legal owner. Hung up. "You're really going to have him arrested?" Carol asked. "No," I said. "I'm going to let him arrest himself. Again." 10 minutes later, a police car pulled up. Officer Reynolds, I knew him from church, got out and walked over to Daniel and the two men with the truck. I couldn't hear the conversation from Carol's porch, but I could see it. Daniel gesturing wildly. The officer shaking his head. The two men with the truck looking nervous. Then Officer Reynolds pulled out his radio. Made a call. Waited. 5 minutes after that, he walked over to Carol's porch. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, tipping his hat. "I understand there's been some confusion about property ownership?" "No confusion, Officer Reynolds," I said. "My name is on the deed. My name is on the mortgage. Everything in that house belongs to me. Daniel has no legal right to sell any of it." Officer Reynolds looked back at Daniel, who was now sitting on the front steps with his head in his hands. "The bank confirmed it," the officer said. "He's been asked to stop removing items immediately. The men with the truck have left." "Thank you, officer." He nodded. Started to leave. Then turned back. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said quietly, "I've known you and Thomas for a long time. I'm sorry it came to this." "Me too," I said. "And I meant it. But sorry doesn't change what needs to happen. Sorry doesn't fix broken trust. Sorry doesn't give back the dignity that Daniel tried to steal when he kicked me out on my own porch." As Officer Reynolds drove away, I watched Daniel stand up and walk into the house. My house. For now. But the clock was ticking. 30 days. That's all he had left. And I was going to make sure he felt every single one of them. The calls started coming in that afternoon. First it was Daniel's friend Marcus, calling my cell phone. "Miss Margaret, I think there's been some kind of mistake," he said. Real polite. Real careful. "Daniel says you're trying to kick him out of his house?" "Daniel doesn't have a house," I said. "He's been living in mine. Rent-free. For 2 years." Silence. Then it was Daniel's ex-girlfriend, Melissa. She'd always been nice to me, that girl. Too good for Daniel, honestly. "Mrs. Hartwell, Daniel called me crying," she said. "He says you're taking everything from him." "Melissa, honey, did Daniel ever tell you how he threw me out 3 days ago? How he changed the locks? How he threw my clothes out a second-story window?" Another silence. Longer this time. "He did what?" "Ask him," I said. "Ask him what he did before you feel too sorry for him." She hung up. I never heard from her again. But the calls kept coming. Friends of Daniel's I'd never met. People from his gym. Even his boss from whatever job he was pretending to have this month. Everyone wanted to know what was happening. Everyone thought there must be some mistake. Poor Daniel, they said. Poor Daniel losing his father's house. But nobody asked about poor Margaret. Nobody wondered what had happened to make a 72-year-old woman take such extreme measures. That's the thing about men like Daniel. They tell their story first. They tell it loud. They make themselves the victim so good that by the time the truth comes out, nobody wants to believe it. On day 5, Daniel showed up at Carol's house again. This time with papers of his own. "I talked to a lawyer," he said through the screen door. "Carol wouldn't let him on the porch. He says I have rights. Squatters' rights. I've been living there for 2 years." I almost laughed. Squatters' rights. In a house where I'd been paying the mortgage the whole time. In a house where he'd been my guest. "Daniel," I said, "did you pay rent?" "What? Rent? Did you pay me rent for those 2 years?" His jaw clenched. "You never asked for rent." "That's because you were a guest. My guest. And guests don't have squatters' rights." The lawyer said. "The lawyer is taking your money and giving you false hope," I interrupted. "You have no claim. None. And your lawyer knows it. He's just billing you by the hour while you figure that out. Daniel's face did that red to purple thing again. You know what? Fine. Fine. I'll move out. But I'm taking everything with me. The furniture, the TV, all of it. No, you're not. It's my stuff. Actually, I said, pulling out my own papers, the ones I'd printed at Carol's house yesterday, most of that furniture was in the house when you moved in. Thomas and I bought it. There's receipts. Dates. Proof of purchase. The only things you can take are what you brought with you. Which, from what I remember, was one suitcase and an attitude problem. The papers shook in his hands. You're unbelievable. You're actually doing this. You're actually trying to make me homeless. No, Daniel, I said quietly. You tried to make me homeless. I'm just declining to be homeless. There's a difference. He threw the papers at the screen door. They fluttered to the ground like dead leaves. I hope you're happy, he spat. I hope you sleep well at night knowing you destroyed your own stepson. I sleep just fine, I said. Because I know I didn't destroy you. You destroyed yourself. He left. Peeled out of Carol's driveway fast enough to leave rubber marks on the pavement. He's going to do something stupid, Carol said from behind me. I know. Should we call the police? Warn them? And tell them what? I asked. That my stepson might do something stupid? They'll say to call back when he actually does it. Carol frowned but didn't argue. She knew I was right. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lay in Carol's guest bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. People always say hindsight is 20/20. They say you can see your mistakes clearly when you look back. But I don't think I made mistakes with Daniel. I think I made choices based on the information I had. Based on the hope I carried. Based on the belief that family meant something. Thomas used to say I was too soft. Too forgiving. He'd say it affectionately, like it was one of my good qualities that also happened to be dangerous. You give people too many chances, Maggie, he'd tell me. Some people don't deserve chances. They just deserve consequences. I'd always argued with him about that. Said everyone deserved chances. Said love could change people. But love doesn't change people who don't want to change. Love just makes you vulnerable to people who know how to use it against you. At 2 a.m, my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. I'm sorry. That's all it said. 2 words. Lowercase. No punctuation except that sad little lowercase I. I stared at those words for a long time. Wondered if he meant them. Wondered if somewhere deep inside, there was still that 7-year-old boy in the too big blue suit, crying because he dropped the rings at his daddy's wedding. Then I remembered him screaming, "It's my house now, old woman," and I put the phone down without responding. Sorry doesn't erase what you've done. Sorry doesn't give back what you've taken. Sorry is just a word people use when they're finally facing consequences and they don't like how it feels. The next morning, I got a call from Jennifer at the bank. Mrs. Hartwell, we have a problem. My stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Daniel came into the bank yesterday. He's claiming fraud. Says you forged his father's signature on the mortgage refinance papers. He's demanding we halt the foreclosure and investigate. I sat down hard on Carol's couch. That's ridiculous. The papers are legal. Thomas signed them himself. You were there, Jennifer. You witnessed it. I know, she said. And I've already told our legal department that. But Daniel hired a lawyer and they're making noise about suing the bank. We have to follow protocol. The foreclosure is being temporarily suspended pending an investigation. How long? Could be a week. Could be a month. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hartwell. I know this isn't what you wanted. After I hung up, I just sat there. Carol brought me tea but I didn't drink it. What happened? She asked. He's fighting back, I said. Claiming I committed fraud. Can he do that? He can claim whatever he wants, I said. Doesn't make it true. But it buys him time. Time to stay in my house. Time to keep living rent-free. Time to sell off whatever he can before they finally kick him out. What are you going to do? I thought about that. Thought about all my options. Thought about what Thomas would do. Then I smiled. I'm going to go visit Father Michael. Carol looked confused. The priest. The priest who married Thomas and me, I said. Who was there when we refinanced? Who signed as a witness on those papers because Thomas wanted someone from the church to be part of it? Understanding dawned on Carol's face. He can testify that the signatures were real. He can testify to a lot of things, I said, including conversations he had with Thomas about Daniel, about why Thomas wanted to protect me. I stood up, grabbed my purse. Can I borrow your car? Take it, Carol said, tossing me the keys. And Margaret? Give him hell. Father Michael was in his office at St. Mary's, working on Sunday's sermon. He looked up when I knocked, and his weathered face broke into a smile. Margaret, he said warmly. I was wondering when you'd come see me. I heard about what happened with Daniel. Of course he'd heard. In a town this small, everybody hears everything. I need your help, Father, I said. Daniel's claiming fraud on the mortgage papers. He's saying I forged Thomas's signature. Father Michael's smile disappeared. That's a serious accusation. It's a false accusation, I said. You were there when we signed those papers. You witnessed it. Thomas specifically asked you to be there. I remember, Father Michael said slowly. He wanted the church to be part of it. Said it would make it sacred. Make it official in God's eyes as well as the laws. The bank is investigating, I said. They might need you to testify. To confirm that Thomas signed those papers willingly. That he was of sound mind. That this was his choice. Father Michael nodded. Of course. I'll do whatever's needed. But Margaret. He paused. Are you sure this is the path you want to take? Legally removing your stepson from his home. It's not his home, I said. It's mine. And he removed me first. Violently. Cruelly. In front of the whole neighborhood. I know, Father Michael said gently. And what he did was wrong. But revenge. This isn't revenge, I interrupted. This is justice. There's a difference. Father Michael studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded again. You're right. There is a difference. And Thomas would be proud of you for standing up for yourself. Would he? I asked. Because suddenly I wasn't sure. Or would he think I should have been the bigger person? Turned the other cheek? Forgiven Daniel and moved on? Thomas loved you more than anything in this world, Father Michael said firmly. And he specifically structured things to protect you from Daniel. That tells me exactly what he would want you to do. He'd want you to fight. To protect yourself. To not let Daniel take what you built together. Relief flooded through me. Because I'd been carrying that question around for days. That worry that maybe I was being too harsh. Too vengeful. Too unforgiving. But hearing Father Michael say it, hearing that Thomas would have wanted this, it settled something in my chest. Thank you, Father, I said. Don't thank me yet, he said with a small smile. Wait until we win. I drove back to Carol's feeling lighter. Feeling sure. Feeling like maybe this was all going to work out after all. But when I pulled into her driveway, I saw something that made my heart stop. Smoke. Rising from across the street. From 1247 Maple Street. From my house. I was out of the car before it fully stopped. The smoke was thick and black, pouring from the back of the house. Not the front. The back. Where the kitchen was. Where Thomas had installed those beautiful oak cabinets himself, spending 3 weekends getting them exactly level. Carol was already on her phone, calling 911. Neighbors were coming out of their houses, standing in their yards, pointing. And Daniel was in the front yard, just standing there. Not running. Not panicking. Just standing there watching my house burn. I ran. Daniel, what did you do? My voice ripped across the lawn, across the street, across the space between the woman I used to be and the woman I'd become. He turned to look at me. His face was blank. Empty. Like he'd unplugged something inside himself and there was nothing left but static. I didn't do anything, he said. Calm. Too calm. The stove must have malfunctioned. The stove. The electric stove that Thomas and I had bought brand new 5 years ago. The one with all the safety features. The one that automatically shut off if you left it on too long. You're lying, I said. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The smoke was getting thicker, darker. I could see orange flames now through the kitchen window. My kitchen. Where I'd made thousands of meals. Where Thomas had kissed me every morning while I made his coffee. Where Daniel had eaten spaghetti as a little boy and told me I was the best cook in the world. All of it burning. Mrs. Hartwell, you need to step back. Officer Reynolds appeared beside me, his hand on my shoulder. The fire department's almost here. But I couldn't step back. Couldn't move. Could only stare at 47 years of memories going up in smoke. He did this, I said. Daniel did this on purpose. Officer Reynolds looked at Daniel, who was still standing there like a statue. Sir, is that true? Did you start this fire? I already told her, Daniel said, his voice flat. The stove malfunctioned. I was cooking. It just caught fire. I tried to put it out, but it spread too fast. Where's the fire extinguisher? Officer Reynolds asked. Daniel blinked. Once. Twice. What? The fire extinguisher. Mrs. Hartwell keeps one in the kitchen, one in the garage. Where are they? I don't know. I couldn't find them. You've lived in that house for 2 years and you don't know where the fire extinguishers are? Daniel's jaw tightened. I panicked, okay? The fire was spreading and I panicked and I just got out. The fire trucks arrived, 3 of them, lights flashing red and blue across everyone's faces. Firefighters jumped out, started unrolling hoses, shouting instructions to each other. I watched them break my front door down. Watched them spray water through my windows. Watched everything Thomas and I built together get destroyed one way or another. Ma'am, is anyone else inside? A firefighter appeared in front of me, his face serious. No, I whispered. Just Daniel. And he's right there. Any pets? I shook my head. We'd had a dog once, a golden retriever named Buddy. But he died 3 years ago and I couldn't bring myself to get another one. The firefighter nodded and ran back to help his crew. Carol appeared beside me, put her arm around my shoulders. Margaret, honey, come sit down. I can't, I said. I can't leave. You're not leaving. Just sitting. Come on. She guided me to her front porch, made me sit in her wicker chair. Brought me water I didn't drink. Held my hand while we watched my house burn. It took 40 minutes to put the fire out. 40 minutes that felt like 40 years. When it was done, the fire chief came over to talk to us. His name was Robert Chun, and his daughter had been in Daniel's class back in elementary school. Mrs. Hartwell, he said, taking off his helmet. The fire started in the kitchen, like your stepson said. But what? He hesitated. But there are some things that don't add up. The pattern of the burn. The intensity. It looks like an accelerant might have been used. An accelerant, I repeated. You mean like gasoline? Or lighter fluid? Something that would make a fire spread faster than normal. He looked back at the house. We're going to have to investigate. Treat this as a potential arson case. My heart was hammering. You think Daniel did this on purpose? I'm not saying anything yet, ma'am. But we need to investigate. In the meantime, the house is uninhabitable. Too much smoke and water damage, even in the parts that didn't burn. So that was it. The house Thomas and I built was gone. Not sold. Not lost to foreclosure. Just gone. Daniel was still standing in the yard, but now there were 2 police officers with him. Asking him questions. Writing things down in little notepads. Mrs. Hartwell? Chief Chun said gently. Do you have somewhere to stay? She's staying with me, Carol said firmly. She's been staying with me. Good. We'll need to talk to you both tomorrow. Get formal statements. But for tonight, try to rest. Rest. Like I could rest knowing that everything I'd owned, everything I'd cherished, everything I'd fought for was sitting across the street in a smoking ruin. If you've ever lost something you couldn't replace, drop a comment. Because what I felt in that moment was beyond words. The police talked to Daniel for over an hour. I watched from Carol's porch, watched him gesture and explain and shake his head. Watched the officers' faces get more serious, more skeptical. Finally, they let him go. But not before making him sign something. Not before taking photos of him, of the house, of everything. Daniel walked toward Carol's house. The officers didn't stop him this time. "Margaret," he said. His voice cracked. "Margaret, I swear I didn't mean for this to happen. The fire, it just—" "Get away from me," I said. "Please, you have to believe me. I was cooking and the oil caught fire and I tried to stop it but—" "Oil," Officer Reynolds said, appearing beside Daniel. "You said it was a stove malfunction. Now it's an oil fire. Which is it?" Daniel's face went pale. Both. The stove malfunctioned while I was cooking with oil." "Aha." Officer Reynolds made a note in his pad. "Mr. Hartwell, I'm going to need you to come down to the station tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Don't be late." "Am I being charged with something?" "Not yet. But the fire marshal wants to ask you some questions. And I suggest you answer them honestly." He looked at me. "Mrs. Hartwell, you should come too. We'll need your statement about the property, about your relationship with Mr. Hartwell, about everything leading up to this." I nodded. Couldn't speak. Daniel stood there for another moment, looking at me like he wanted to say something else. But whatever it was, he kept it inside. He turned and walked away, down the street, into the darkness. "Where's he going?" Carol asked. "Don't know," Officer Reynolds said. "Don't care. Long as it's away from here." After everyone left, the firefighters, the police, the neighbors who'd gathered to watch, Carol and I sat on her porch in the dark. The smell of smoke hung in the air, thick and acrid. "He burned it down," I said. "He actually burned it down. Looks that way." Thomas built that house with his own hands. Board by board. Nail by nail. And Daniel just destroyed it. "Not all of it," Carol said quietly. "The fire was mostly in the back. The front rooms, the bedrooms, they've got smoke and water damage but the structure's still there. It can be rebuilt." "With what money?" I laughed, but it came out bitter. "I'm 72 years old, Carol. I'm living on Thomas's pension and Social Security. I can't afford to rebuild a house." "Insurance," Carol said. "You've got homeowner's insurance, right?" I did. Thomas had made sure we always had good insurance. But insurance takes time. Months, sometimes. And in the meantime, what was I supposed to do? "I'm tired," I said. "I'm so tired of fighting." "Then don't fight," Carol said. "Let the law fight for you. Let the insurance company fight for you. You just rest." But I couldn't rest. Not yet. Because something was nagging at me. Something about the timing of all this. "Carol," I said slowly. "The foreclosure was suspended yesterday. The bank halted everything because Daniel claimed fraud. So if the house burned down while I still owned it, the insurance pays me. But if Daniel's fraud claim went through, if he somehow proved the house was his—" I trailed off, thinking. "Then he'd get the insurance money," Carol finished. "You think that's what this was about?" "I think Daniel's desperate," I said. "I think he realized he was losing everything and decided if he couldn't have the house, nobody could. But he also wanted to make sure it looked like an accident so he could collect the insurance." That's insane. That's Daniel. We sat in silence for a while. Then Carol asked, "What are you going to do?" "Tomorrow," I said, "I'm going to talk to the fire marshal. I'm going to tell them everything. About Daniel kicking me out. About the foreclosure. About him trying to claim fraud. About all of it. And then I'm going to let him face the consequences of his own actions. Every single one." That night, I lay in Carol's guest bed and stared at the ceiling again. But this time was different. This time I wasn't thinking about the past. I was thinking about the future. Daniel had made his choice. He'd chosen to destroy rather than surrender. Chosen to burn it all down rather than admit defeat. But what he didn't understand, what he'd never understood, was that you can burn down a house, but you can't burn down the truth. And the truth was about to come out in ways he never expected. The fire marshal's office smelled like burnt coffee and old paper. I sat across from Fire Marshal Davis, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense attitude. She'd spread photos of my house across the desk, before photos, after photos, photos of the burn patterns that apparently told a story. "Mrs. Hartwell," she said, "I'm going to be direct with you. This fire was deliberately set." Even though I'd suspected it, hearing it out loud made my stomach turn. "You're sure?" "Positive. We found evidence of lighter fluid in multiple locations. Kitchen, hallway, living room. Someone poured an accelerant throughout the back of the house and lit it." "Daniel," I said. "We can't prove that yet. But he was the only one in the house at the time." She pulled out another photo. "We also found these in the garage. Empty lighter fluid bottles. 3 of them. Purchased yesterday from the hardware store on 5th Street. "He planned it," I said. "He didn't just snap. He planned it." Marshal Davis nodded. "The hardware store has security footage. Shows Mr. Hartwell purchasing the lighter fluid at approximately 2 p.m. yesterday. Paid cash. Then he went home and waited until this morning to start the fire." I thought about that. About Daniel going to the store, buying supplies to burn down my house, carrying them home like he was just running normal errands. How cold did you have to be to do that? "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we turn our evidence over to the DA's office. They'll decide whether to press charges. But between you and me..." She leaned forward. "This is going to trial. We've got purchase records, security footage, physical evidence, and motive. Your stepson is going to jail." Jail. The word hung in the air like smoke. How long? "Arson is a felony. First degree, since it was premeditated. Could be anywhere from 5 to 15 years depending on the judge." 15 years. Daniel would be in his 60s when he got out. Part of me felt sick. But another part, a part one didn't want to examine too closely, felt satisfied. "There's something else," Marshal Davis said. She pulled out another document. "We ran a background check on Mr. Hartwell. Did you know he has a prior arrest record?" I blinked. "What?" 2 years ago. Before he moved in with you. He was arrested for check fraud. Wrote bad checks totaling $15,000. The charges were eventually dropped because the business owner declined to press charges, but it's still on his record." Check fraud. Bad checks. $15,000. "I didn't know," I said quietly. "He never told me." "Most criminals don't advertise their crimes," Marshal Davis said dryly. "But it establishes a pattern. Fraud then, arson now. It's going to help the prosecution's case." I left the fire marshal's office feeling numb. Drove Carol's car to the bank, where Jennifer was waiting for me with more paperwork. "Mrs. Hartwell," she said, "I'm so sorry about the fire. We heard what happened." "Thank you." The good news is that the fraud investigation is closed. Father Michael's testimony confirmed everything. The mortgage papers are legitimate. The house is legally yours. She paused. "Or was yours. Before." "Before my stepson burned it down," I finished. Jennifer winced. "Yes. But that means the insurance payout will come to you. We've already contacted your insurance company. They're sending an adjuster out tomorrow." "How much?" I asked. "How much is the payout?" She checked her computer. "Your policy covers up to $350,000 for the structure, plus another $100,000 for contents. Given the extent of the damage, you'll likely get close to the full amount. $450,000. More than enough to rebuild. More than enough to start over. If I wanted to." "Mrs. Hartwell?" Jennifer said. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know what I am anymore." I spent the rest of the day giving statements. To the police. To the insurance adjuster who came early. To a lawyer that Carol insisted I hire. His name was Robert Green, and he'd been practicing law in our town for 30 years. He listened to my whole story without interrupting, taking notes in neat handwriting. When I finished, he sat back and whistled low. "Mrs. Hartwell, you've got one hell of a case here." "For what?" For everything. Emotional distress. Elder abuse. Illegal eviction. Property damage. And that's just the civil side. Criminally, he's looking at arson charges, possibly attempted insurance fraud if the DA can prove he was trying to collect the payout. I don't want to sue him, I said. I just want justice. Sometimes they're the same thing, Mr. Green said. But I understand. For now, let's focus on making sure the criminal charges stick. Once he's convicted, we can talk about civil remedies. Have you ever watched someone you loved destroy themselves? Drop a like if you're still with me, because this story is about to take a turn nobody expected. That evening, I finally went back to look at the house. Really look at it. The front was mostly intact, like Carol had said. Smoke-stained and water-damaged, but standing. The back was a disaster. The kitchen was gone completely, just charred beams and melted appliances. The hallway was blackened. The living room was a mess of ash and broken glass. But the bedrooms were salvageable. The master bedroom where Thomas had died peacefully in his sleep. The guest room where Daniel had stayed for 2 years. Even Daniel's old childhood room from when he was little, which we'd turned into storage. I walked through carefully, stepping over debris, avoiding the weak spots in the floor. Every step brought back memories. Here's where Thomas proposed to me, down on one knee in the hallway even though we'd been dating for only 3 months. Here's where we hung our wedding photo, the one with both of us laughing because the photographer had told a terrible joke. Here's where Daniel had drawn on the wall with crayon when he was 8, and instead of getting mad, Thomas had just drawn with him, turning it into a mural of stick figures and sunshine. All of it damaged. All of it tainted now by what Daniel had done. Mrs. Hartwell? I turned. Officer Reynolds was standing in what used to be my doorway. You shouldn't be in here, he said. It's not safe. I know. I just needed to see it. He nodded, understanding. We arrested Daniel an hour ago. Charged him with first-degree arson. He's being held at county jail. Bail hearing is tomorrow. Is he going to get bail? Probably not. Flight risk, severity of the crime, danger to the community. The DA's going to argue for remand, and I think the judge will agree. So Daniel would sit in jail until trial. Months, maybe. Living in a cell, eating bad food, wearing an orange jumpsuit. Part of me, a very small part, felt sorry for him. But then I looked around at what he'd done, and that feeling disappeared. Officer Reynolds, I said, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think I did the right thing? Fighting back like I did? Or should I have just let him win? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Mrs. Hartwell, I've been a cop for 23 years. You know what I've learned? That there's a difference between being nice and being good. Nice people let others walk all over them. Good people stand up for themselves and others. You stood up for yourself. That makes you good. I thought about that as I walked out of the ruined house. About being nice versus being good. About all the times I'd been nice to Daniel when I should have been good to myself. Never again. Carol was waiting on her porch when I got back. How bad is it? Bad, I said. But not unfixable. Are you going to fix it? I sat down beside her. I don't know yet. Part of me wants to rebuild, make it exactly like it was, prove that Daniel couldn't destroy what Thomas and I built. But another part of me just wants to sell the land and move on. Start fresh somewhere new. What would Thomas want? I smiled. Thomas would want me to be happy. Whatever that looks like. Then take your time, Carol said. Don't make any big decisions while you're still processing all this. She was right. I needed time. Time to grieve. Time to heal. Time to figure out who Margaret Hartwell was going to be in this next chapter of her life. Because one thing was certain, I wasn't going back to being the woman who let people take advantage of her kindness. That woman had burned up in the fire too. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. I sat in the front row, hands folded in my lap, watching Daniel shuffle in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. He looked terrible. Hair unwashed, face pale, eyes hollow. He saw me and quickly looked away. The bail hearing took less than 10 minutes. The DA presented evidence, the lighter fluid receipts, the security footage, the fire marshal's report. Daniel's lawyer, some public defender who looked fresh out of law school, argued that his client was a lifelong resident with no intention of fleeing. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s named Judith Brennan, wasn't having it. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, "you're charged with first-degree arson of a dwelling. Your own stepmother's dwelling, which she was forcibly removed from just days before. The evidence suggests premeditation and malicious intent. Bail is denied. You'll remain in custody until trial." Daniel's lawyer protested. Daniel himself looked like he might pass out. But the gavel came down and that was that. They led him away. He looked back at me one more time before disappearing through a door. I couldn't read his expression. Anger, maybe. Or regret. Or just the blank emptiness I'd seen in his eyes the day of the fire. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Somehow the story had leaked. Small-town gossip travels faster than wildfire. "Mrs. Hartwell, how do you feel about your stepson's arrest? Are you going to sue him civilly? Do you think he deserves jail time?" I pushed through them without answering. Carol had driven me, and she hustled me into her car before they could corner us properly. "Vultures," she muttered, pulling away from the curb. But that night, the story ran on the local news. Stepson arrested for arson after evicting elderly stepmother. They showed footage of the burned house, of Daniel being led into court, of me walking out looking tired and old. My phone started ringing. Friends I hadn't heard from in years. Distant relatives. Even some reporters asking for exclusive interviews. I turned the phone off. The insurance adjuster came back 3 days later with an official assessment. $438,000. The check would be cut within 2 weeks. "What are you going to do with it?" Carol asked over dinner that night. "I've been thinking about that," I said. "The house can be rebuilt for maybe $200,000, $250 if I do it nice. That leaves almost $200,000 left over. That's a nice nest egg for retirement. Or," I said slowly, "I could use it for something else." Carol raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Like setting up a fund. For older people who are being taken advantage of by family members. Legal fees, safe housing, whatever they need to get out of bad situations." Carol stared at me. Margaret, that's beautiful." "I keep thinking about how lucky I was," I said. "That Thomas protected me with that mortgage paperwork. That I had you to stay with. That I knew my rights. But how many other people are in situations like I was and don't have those advantages?" "A lot," Carol said quietly. "More than we probably know. So I want to help them. Turn what Daniel did into something good. Something that would make Thomas proud." The idea grew over the next few days. I talked to Mr. Green about setting it up legally. Talked to Father Michael about spreading the word through church networks. Talked to the local senior center about identifying people who might need help. The Hartwell Justice Fund, I'd call it. In memory of Thomas. In spite of Daniel. If this story is teaching you something about standing up for yourself, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's keep going. 2 weeks after the fire, I got a visitor I wasn't expecting. Melissa. Daniel's ex-girlfriend. The one who'd called me after he'd been kicked out. "Mrs. Hartwell," she said when I answered Carol's door, "I'm so sorry to bother you. But I needed to tell you something." I invited her in. Made tea. Waited. "After I talked to you," Melissa said, "after you told me what Daniel did, I started thinking about our relationship. About things he'd said and done that I'd ignored or made excuses for." "Like what?" "Like how he'd borrow money and never pay it back. How he'd get angry when I questioned him about where he was or who he was with. How he always had some scheme going, some way to make quick money that never seemed to work out." She looked down at her tea. "I thought I was helping him. Thought I was being supportive. But really I was just enabling him." "We all enabled him," I said. "Including me." "But you stopped," Melissa said. "You drew a line and said enough." "I never did that. I just kept making excuses until he finally left me for someone else." "Why are you telling me this?" She pulled out an envelope. "Because Daniel asked me to bring this to you. He called from jail. Said he'd written you a letter and could I please deliver it. I almost said no, but..." She shrugged. I thought you should have the choice whether to read it or not. I took the envelope. My name was written on the front in Daniel's handwriting. Neat block letters, like Thomas had taught him when he was young. Thank you, Melissa, I said. After she left, I sat with that envelope for an hour, just looking at it, feeling its weight. Finally, I opened it. Dear Margaret, it started. I don't even know if you'll read this, but I need to write it anyway. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now. I know sorry doesn't fix what I did or undo the damage. But I am sorry. Sitting in this jail cell, I've had a lot of time to think. About what I did. About why I did it. About how I became the kind of person who would burn down his own stepmother's house. I keep going back to that day Dad died. Do you remember what he said to me? His last words? You were sleeping in the chair by his bed, and he woke up and saw me standing there. He said, Danny, I love you. But I don't trust you. And that's my failure as much as yours. I was so angry. So hurt. I thought he was being cruel. Saying that on his deathbed. But he was right. He knew what I was. What I'd become. And he was disappointed in me. I spent 2 years trying to prove him wrong. Trying to prove I could handle things, could be the man of the house, could take care of you and the property and everything. But all I proved was that he was right not to trust me. When I found out the house was yours, that Dad had specifically structured things to keep it away from me, it broke something inside me. Not just anger. Not just hurt. But this understanding that my own father knew I'd try to take advantage of you. That he'd seen who I really was and had planned accordingly. And instead of proving him wrong, I proved him right in the worst way possible. I burned down the house because I wanted to hurt you. I wanted you to feel the pain I was feeling. And I'm ashamed of that. Deeply ashamed. I know you probably hate me. I deserve that. I deserve a lot worse than that. But I want you to know that you didn't fail me. Dad didn't fail me. I failed myself. Every choice, every lie, every time I took the easy way out instead of doing the work, those were my choices. My failures. And now I have to live with that. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even think I want it, because I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know the truth. All of it. Dad loved you so much. You made him happier than I'd ever seen him. And I'm sorry I couldn't be the son who made both of you proud. I'm sorry for everything. Daniel. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. Carol found me sitting there with tears on my face. Margaret? What's wrong? He wrote me an apology, I said. A real one. Not because he wants something or hopes it'll help his case. Just an apology. What are you going to do? Nothing, I said. Because sorry doesn't change anything. It doesn't rebuild the house. It doesn't erase what he did. It's just words on paper. But you're crying, Carol said gently. Because he was right, I said. About Thomas. About seeing who Daniel really was and being disappointed. I knew Thomas was disappointed in him, but I never realized how much it hurt Daniel. How much it shaped everything that came after. That doesn't excuse what he did. No, I agreed. But it explains it. And maybe that's worth something. I put the letter in a drawer and didn't look at it again. Because understanding why someone hurt you doesn't mean you have to let them back in. It just means you can finally close the door without wondering what you missed. 3 months later, the trial began. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Security footage of Daniel buying lighter fluid. The fire marshal's testimony about accelerants and burn patterns. My testimony about being kicked out, about the mortgage papers, about the whole ugly history. Daniel's lawyer tried to argue that it was an accident. That Daniel had been cooking and the fire got out of control and he panicked. But the lighter fluid receipts destroyed that defense. You don't accidentally buy 3 bottles of lighter fluid the day before your stepmother's house mysteriously burns down. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. On the charge of first-degree arson, we find the defendant guilty. Daniel didn't react. Just sat there, staring straight ahead. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. Daniel was led away again, back to county jail, back to his cell. I didn't feel victorious. Didn't feel satisfied or vindicated or any of the things I thought I'd feel. I just felt sad. Sad for the little boy in the too big suit who'd cried at his daddy's wedding. Sad for the man who'd let his anger and entitlement destroy any chance at redemption. Sad for all of us who'd loved him and failed to save him from himself. "It's over," Carol said as we left the courthouse. "You can move on now." But it wasn't over. Not quite yet. The sentencing hearing was packed. Apparently the case had attracted attention beyond our small town. Stories about elder abuse, family betrayal, and justice had struck a chord with people. The judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I'd prepared something, worked on it with Mr. Green, practiced it until I had it memorized. But when I stood up at the podium and looked at Daniel sitting there in his orange jumpsuit, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen him, the prepared speech disappeared from my mind. Instead, I just spoke from the heart. "Your Honor, Daniel Hartwell is my stepson. I raised him from the time he was 7 years old. I fed him, clothed him, loved him like he was my own blood. When his father died, I let him live in our house rent-free for 2 years because he was family and you don't give up on family. He repaid that kindness by throwing me out of my own home, by screaming at me in front of my neighbors, by trying to steal what my late husband and I built together. And when that didn't work, by burning it all down. But I'm not here to ask you to punish him out of revenge. I'm here because what Daniel did wasn't just personal. It was criminal. And if we don't hold people accountable for their actions, even when they're family, especially when they're family, then what are we saying to the next person who thinks they can abuse an elderly relative and get away with it? Thomas, my late husband, used to say that consequences are how life teaches us lessons. Daniel has spent his whole life avoiding consequences. And look where it got him. So I'm asking you, Your Honor, to give Daniel the one thing he's never truly received, real meaningful consequences for his actions. Not because I hate him, but because maybe, just maybe, it'll finally teach him the lesson that his father and I never could. I sat down. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked at Daniel. "Mr. Hartwell, do you have anything to say?" Daniel stood up slowly. His lawyer tried to stop him, but Daniel shook his head. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. His voice was hoarse. "I just want to say that Mrs. Hartwell is right. About all of it. I've spent my whole life making excuses, blaming other people, avoiding responsibility. And it's destroyed everything good in my life. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want the court to know that I understand what I did was wrong. Not just illegal, but evil. I tried to destroy the woman who raised me because I was angry and selfish and stupid. And I'm sorry. To Margaret, to my father's memory, to everyone I hurt. I'm sorry." He sat down. His lawyer patted his shoulder awkwardly. The judge took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was tired. "Mr. Hartwell, the court has reviewed the evidence, the testimony, and the pre-sentencing report. Your actions were premeditated, malicious, and directed at a vulnerable victim who had shown you nothing but kindness. The fact that this victim was your stepmother makes it even more egregious. However, the court also notes your lack of prior violent offenses and your apparent remorse, as evidenced by your letter to Mrs. Hartwell and your statement today. Therefore, the court sentences you to 8 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. You will also be required to pay restitution to Mrs. Hartwell in the amount of $200,000, which represents the cost of rebuilding the portions of the house you destroyed. Additionally, you are hereby barred from contacting Mrs. Hartwell directly or indirectly for the duration of your sentence and probation, unless she initiates contact. Do you understand this sentence?" "Yes, Your Honor," Daniel said quietly. "Then we're adjourned." The gavel came down. Daniel was led away. I watched him go, watched him look back one last time with something that might have been regret or relief or just exhaustion. And then he was gone. Outside, reporters swarmed again. But this time I stopped and answered their questions. "How do you feel about the sentence?" "I feel like justice was served." "Do you think 8 years is enough?" "I think consequences matter more than punishment. Daniel will have 8 years to think about his choices. What he does with that time is up to him." "Will you ever forgive him?" I paused at that one. Really thought about it. "I don't know," I said honestly. Forgiveness isn't something you decide to do. It's something that happens over time, if it happens at all. Right now, I'm focused on rebuilding my life, not on whether I can forgive the person who tried to destroy it. The interview clips ran on the evening news. And then, surprisingly, they went viral. Videos of me talking about consequences and forgiveness and standing up for yourself got shared thousands of times. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, exploded with messages. From people thanking me for speaking out. From other elderly people sharing their own stories of family abuse. From complete strangers telling me I was an inspiration. It was overwhelming. But also, in a strange way, healing. Because my story wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who'd ever been taken.